Hello, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Lake, for the introduction. My name is Owen Price, and I'm joined here by Sarah Richard, Deni Thuman, and Sean Skinner. And today we will be discussing our project, analyzing New Hampshire's recreation harvest of American oysters. American oysters can be found throughout the United States, including here in New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, they are an important keystone species within the Great Bay Estuary. Oysters act as a natural filtration system and provide habitat for fish and invertebrates. In New Hampshire, they bring value to the economy and are harvested regularly. Historically, the population in Great Bay Estuary reached points of 25 million, but due to anthropogenic and natural effects, the population has decreased around 90% to around 2.1 million today. Our study location is in New Hampshire at specific points in the Great Bay Estuary, these points being Nanny Island and Woodman Point. We selected these locations because the Nature Conservancy has just finished conducting a 5-year restoration project between these oyster beds. This is located on the map where the red square can be seen. Harvesting of oysters is common in New Hampshire. However, there were past disagreements about whether current recreational harvesting levels are adding stress to oyster habitat.
For our study, we had two different research goals. The first was to determine the viability of the American oyster population located at the Nanny Island and Woodman Point when faced with varying levels of harvest. And the second was to produce knowledge on the cultural significance of recreational shellfishing within New Hampshire's coastal watershed. And these two research goals are important together because it allows us to incorporate human dimensions into oyster management that will help maintain a suitable population of American oysters within New Hampshire. To determine the viability of the American oysters in our study sites, we conducted a population viability analysis using the program Vortex. And in Vortex, we used a number of parameters to represent the ecology and life strategies of oysters and also the external factors that have a potential impact on the population. We used 3 different harvest rates for our PVA models, and we tested half a bushel per license, 1 bushel per license, and 3.5 bushels per license.
For our interviews, we conducted 30-minute semi-structured interviews with recreational shellfishers and those closely related to the topic. These interviews had IRB approval and contained a total of 12 questions, including those asking the definition of culture, current regulations, and future challenges recreational shellfishers might face.
For our results, we ran 3 PVAs. For each PVA, we ran 100 simulations, and each line on the graph represents different simulations. The first graph is our baseline PVA, where we inputted a harvest rate of a half bushel of oysters per year. As you can see, the growth rate for this graph is negative with a decline in population. The graph on the top of the slide is our next PVA, where we inputted a harvest rate of 1 bushel of oysters per year, while the bottom graph has a harvest rate of 3.5 bushels of oysters per year. Both graphs have a negative growth rate as well. With the 3 PVAs, it's important to notice that all oyster populations are decreasing over the 18-year time period at both sites.
For our interview results, we selected quotes from interviewees that highlighted thoughts on culture, regulation, and future challenges. Interviewees' responses revealed that they felt there were barriers for entering the sport, a high bushel take for recreational oysters, and that climate change is going to affect their ability to shellfish. These quotes are only the tip of the iceberg. More interviews will be conducted following today's presentation, as well as an in-depth analysis of all the interviewees' responses for common themes. In conclusion, we can take away 3 major points from each of our research goals. For our PVA, all scenarios point towards the population declining. While this decline might not happen right away, the added stress of recreational shellfishing poses risk to the population. Additionally, our PVA uncovered that the population might be at its teetering point. Each scenario's probability of extinction nears 50%. Finally, we recognize that the ecosystem is highly sensitive. 1 year of high salinity or increased water pollution could be detrimental to the species. Is the risk of taking oysters worth the loss of a keystone species? From our interviews, we saw interviewees speak upon culture's exclusivity, noting it was hard for new individuals to join, a desire for conservation to make sure the sport will continue for years to come, and a recognition that the changing climate will have impacts on the population's sustainability. Moving forward, our best action is to incorporate stakeholders and community within oyster management. Fortunately, steps are being taken to make this happen. The Oyster Conservationist Program takes local New Hampshire volunteers with docks to participate in the raising of oysters that get planted at restoration sites within the bay. Additionally, TNC has stepped forward with the SOAR program during the COVID-19 pandemic to purchase unpurchased oysters for usage in restoration projects. TNC has purchased more than 5 million surplus oysters to this date. We just want to thank everyone for coming to our presentation and acknowledge the people below for all the data that they've helped us to make this happen. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them later. Thanks.